The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, you know. My cold
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans. De Bruyne.
That is what Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira.
And we're back. Welcome to another episode of A Tad Predictable, the post-season edition. Got some interesting feedback on our Bournemouth podcast the other day, where we obviously looked at helping them become one of the mainstays in the Premier League last season. Again, one of those podcasts I was really excited to do. Surprisingly excited. I was speaking to Dave Hendrick from Two Footed Podcast, also on this EPL Index channel, and we were sort of discussing some of the more exciting teams in the Premier League at the moment that have potential to really do something fun and special. Bournemouth was one of those that I brought up after having gone through the research and looking at what Bournemouth could do in the postseason. I really got excited for Bournemouth fans and what could become quite an exciting team in the Premier League going forward. Another team was Crystal Palace. Obviously, we'll get to them in a couple of days' time in terms of their podcast and focusing on them and what they can do. But this podcast, we will be focusing on Brentford, a team that it seems like they sort of started to stagnate a bit. Maybe it's starting to get a bit stale. We know their manager, Thomas Frank, has been sort of flirting with other clubs. I don't know how Brentford feel about that. I don't know if there's sort of an understanding that he was always, you know, like they wouldn't stand in his way if a bigger club did come in for him. But I'm interested to see if he does get a job at maybe a more recognized club or a more established club than Brentford. I think he's doing a great job there, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's there for a couple more seasons. But maybe some teams may start looking to flirt with him and see if it does capitalize and materialize into him being the manager of another team. We know, for example, that were reports yesterday that Man United Chiefs did meet with the agents of Thomas Frank over replacing Eric Ten Hag, whilst they were still debating over whether or not to keep Ten Hag. So Frank was one of the managers that was spoken about. Obviously, he was on the shortlist for the Chelsea job. He didn't end up getting that one, but it seems like he's definitely one of those managers that other teams are keeping an eye on, and certainly will be on a lot of shortlists if managers do get sacked over the course of the season. So one to keep an eye out if you're a Brentford fan. In terms of the squad itself, obviously, I'm looking at how much they probably could have heading into next season in terms of finances. And I think a lot of it's going to have to be raised from player sales, and we will get to sort of that side of things. But I did want to just mention that financial aspect for you guys. Sort of, you can get mulling over who, obviously there's one obvious one that is likely to get sold this summer, but who else in that squad they could probably be looking to sell to raise funds. As I said, it seems like a squad that's slowly starting to get a bit stale, and I'm sure they'll be hoping to sort of rejuvenate them and also get some good signings. I say that because I feel like the last couple of transfer windows, not all of the signings that they've made have been really as impactful as they would have wanted them to. So one of those clubs that was praised for their very data-driven process throughout the seasons as they were heading towards the Premier League. And they've not really landed a lot of those type of deals where you're looking at them and you're thinking, wow, what a steal, value for money. Maybe it was a lot easier for them to do that in the lower divisions. Some of the players that were discarded by some of the bigger teams or were on the rise but were still hidden gems, they really did well getting those players leading up to them being promoted to the Premier League. But in the Premier League, I don't know if they've hit the ground running yet, and they've already made a signing that's the alleged replacement for Ivan Toney. And also one of those where there are question marks over whether he can fill the shoes for Ivan Toney. But as I said, we'll get to the transfers a bit later on in the podcast. What we'll do now before we jump into Brentford, obviously there's Euros starting in a couple of days' time. I'm sure a lot of players are going to be in the shop window for that one. But let's look at some of the headlines that are grabbing the attention of maybe the Premier League gossip train in terms of transfers. We've seen, reports linking Bayern Munich to Liverpool defender Joe Gomez. Look, it seems like Bayern want another centre-back. It seems like they're willing to get rid of one of their own centre-backs and looking for a replacement. De Ligt obviously came into European football from the Dutch league with really high praise, and he's not really hit the ground running the way that people would have thought. Certainly not what his reputation was starting to get to. Injuries have been an issue for him. So it will be interesting bringing in a Joe Gomez who's also suffered from injuries throughout his career. Obviously had a big season for Liverpool last season, deputising at left back for most of the season. But maybe get someone who's a bit more robust. But yeah, for Joe Gomez, it will be interesting to see what he does this summer, whether he wants to go and secure more first-team football or if he's happy staying at Liverpool. Some of the other news, obviously, Matty Cash is one of those players that seems to be targeted by a few teams. We've got AC Milan, for example, that are trying to talk with Aston Villa about potentially getting him on board. Villa want about 30 million for him. It seems pricey. I don't know if you guys feel that way as well, but 30 million seems an awful lot for Matty Cash. I was thinking in the range of 20 to 25 million for him. So we'll see whether or not Aston Villa will be willing to lower the price to somewhere around there. Some of the other transfer news that's hanging around, obviously, well, there's confirmation the other day that Ten Hag is staying at Man United. And there are rumblings that some of the potential managers that could have come into Man United weren't impressed with first of all, it seems like Man United were trying to lowball in terms of the contracts that they were offering to managers coming in. And then also the budget for the transfer window wasn't maybe what people would have associated with Man United in the past. We know Man United like big, splashy signings. They spend an awful lot of money, sometimes not on players that suit their system, but it seems like maybe they're going away from that approach and the budget wasn't as big as some of the other managers would have been expecting. Maybe that had an impact in Man United deciding to keep Ten Hag. Maybe he was more willing to work within the budget. Looking at some other news in terms of gossip around, obviously Chelsea are considering Dominic Solanke. We spoke about that in depth in the previous episode, so definitely go check that out. We spoke about what Bournemouth could do if Dom Solanke does get sold. And last but not least, I'll touch on Luton's interest in, Fulham's interest in Luton defender Mengi. Obviously 21, centre-back. Fulham just lost Tosin on a free transfer. They'll be looking to bring in more depth in that position. I think it's a decent signing for Fulham. I don't know if he comes in and is a big, impactful starter for them. They might need to get another centre-back as well. And by all accounts, from what I'm understanding, Fulham want 2 centre-backs to come in. So that's one to keep an eye on. Maybe Mengi as sort of the depth piece and then a starter coming in for them as well. Yeah, not much else. I think maybe it's quieting down a little bit as we're getting closer to Euros. Maybe agents are being a bit more cautious, especially if their players are at Euros, because they want the players to then go and showcase what they can do, and then the agents can go back onto, to the table, negotiation table, and say, look, either my player's performed well, he wants a new contract, or, maybe he wants to move away now. Maybe they'll drum up more interest with the displays that they have. So, yeah, I'm expecting it to get a bit quieter going forward. Maybe it'll start to pick up again once teams get knocked out of the Euros and other teams around the leagues are starting to come back, to pre-season. Managers are starting to come back from holidays. This is when maybe some of the quicker pace deals will start to kick in and teams will start to look a bit more transformed. But yeah, let's then put that to one side. We'll obviously continue discussing gossip and all of the business around the Premier League in and around these podcasts as they pop up. But now let's focus on what most of you would have been coming here for, which is the Brentford rundown. We're obviously looking at what Brentford did last season. We're looking at what they could be looking to do this coming season. And then obviously going forward, what the outlook is for them in terms of aspirations in the Premier League. They seem to be a club that's kind of now established themselves as mainstays in the Premier League, and I'm sure they'll be looking to improve on that, go beyond that, and see what else they can do. In terms of a record, ended up finishing 16th in the Premier League. I mean, very disappointing season on all accounts for Brentford from that perspective. I don't think they would have been expecting to be that close to the relegation zone, having only a 26% win rate in the Premier League. But look, they had the big blow of Ivan Toney being suspended. They brought in some reinforcements with the likes of Mopé to try and cover for that 6 months that he was out. And it didn't quite work out in terms of them having luck with their forward line, because we know Mbeumo had that massive injury, and I just felt so bad for him because he was playing so well. He seemed to be the driving force of that attack in the absence of Ivan Toney, and was on the verge of earning himself a big move out of Brentford, if I'm being honest with you. There was murmurs. I know, for example, Liverpool watched him a few times, and now that he's come back from injury, those rumors are starting to pick up again that Liverpool are one of those teams that have sort of kicked the tires on Mbeumo and seen what could they get Mbeumo for. So he could potentially be one that ends up being transferred. I've not, spoiler alert, going a bit ahead of myself, I've not sold him on this iteration of what we're doing with Brentford. But if Brentford do end up selling him, I think they could get a decent fee for him, and that will obviously open up more avenues for what they could do. And it would really be a refresh of the team, because, losing Ivan Toney and Mbeumo in the same window, I think, is a lot. And you have to get your signings right in terms of replacements, because you could fall down the league table very quickly if you don't have goal scorers. And we know Ivan Toney, we know Mbeumo produce end product really, really well for Brentford. And if they bring in players that end up struggling in that situation, it could end up being a disaster season for Brentford. If they thought last season was bad, it could end up being a real disaster next season. So yeah, 16th in the Premier League. I think after having, the dust settle and reflecting on the season that's been, they're probably just happy to have stayed in the Premier League because they can go again, you know what I mean, in terms of re-establishing the team, as I said, refreshing the team and looking to look up the table instead of behind them in the rearview mirror. So yeah, important for them to stay in the league. It would have been catastrophic for them if they ended up going down. FA Cup, third round in the FA Cup for them, and then the Carabao Cup, they also finished in, they also lost in the third round. Although obviously FA Cup, they entered it in the third round. The Carabao Cup, they entered it in the second round. They had the 1-1 draw with Newport when they won 3-0 on penalties, and then obviously lost to Arsenal 1-0 at home in the third round, of the Carabao Cup. In terms of the FA Cup, they had the 1-1 draw with Wolverhampton. Obviously a tough break getting another Premier League team in the draw. And then in the second sort of replay match, the controversial FA Cup replay. In that match, they ended up losing 3-2 in extra time. Obviously disappointing for them to not do well in the Cups, but considering the season that they've had, it probably was better for them that they went out of the Cups so they could focus on the league and just making sure they stayed up. You don't want to pull a Wigan. You don't want to be struggling in the league, go far in a Cup, and it end up costing you in the long term. And we've seen Wigan haven't come back yet to the Premier League. So it's a dangerous thing. I always tend to think if you're one of those sort of mid-table, lower-table teams and you're comfortable that you're staying up, okay, fair enough. Big run in the FA Cup, big run in the Carabao Cup. But if you're struggling in the league, I'm not opposed to just going out of those cups, because the bread and butter is the leagues, unfortunately, when it comes to the amount of money that is in the Premier League. It ends up taking priority and a lot of emphasis on what these clubs end up doing and the decision-making that happens for them. So, yeah, for Brentford, they've stayed in the Premier League. That's good news for them. They're going to need to work on that 26% win rate going into next season. I've mentioned the budget. I've mentioned that I don't think they've got too much. Maybe at a stretch, 30 million without sales, creeping up to 40 million if everything plays out for them. But I think from a cautious perspective, we know there's the profit and sustainability rules. I'm thinking Brentford probably have in and around 30 million to spend before they've got the sales. But again, they've got a big sale coming. So that's probably going to bolster their coffers quite a lot. So let's jump into that, shall we? Ivan Toney, interesting season for Mr. Ivan Toney. Obviously, he had the suspension, the 6-month suspension for the betting situation that he was involved in. Now, my theory, right? As soon as Ivan Toney had that 6-month ban, it was, let's head into last season's transfer window. I was advocating for a team like Tottenham Hotspurs to sign Ivan Toney in that window. So last year's summer window, we know he's got the 6-month ban. Sign him now. You could probably get a better deal for him when he's got that suspension, and Brentford could then use that money to help bolster themselves this season and going forward. But you could have gone to them and said, look, you're not going to have this guy for 6 months and you could be in trouble. And it turned out they were in trouble. 6 months down the road, here's some money now, go and reinvest it. And then if you're Tottenham, you sort of stolen the march on all the other teams that might be interested in Ivan Toney. That's how I would have played it. I would have looked to get Ivan Toney last summer, have him, obviously, he's got the suspension, he's probably not allowed to train, or he wasn't, confirmation, hey, thank you, in my ear, he wasn't allowed to then train with the team and stuff like that. But you've got 6 months for him to settle. I guess if he's moving to Tottenham, he doesn't have to move too far. But, I'm using Tottenham as the example here, but any club that's signing him, you've got 6 months for him to do all of the things that fans usually forget about: settling down, finding a house, finding your feet in the community that you're going to be staying in. If you've got significant others, if you've got children, getting them into schools, getting your significant other settled in, having your family settled in if they're coming on board as well. Like, there's a lot of stuff that the admin stuff that it doesn't grab the headlines. Like, if a player's, we've seen players who have struggled to settle in that are still staying in hotels 3, 4, 5 months into their stint at club. And, fans are wondering, why is this player playing so bad? Their life at home is not settled. But that's usually not something that's spoken about a lot, either by the pundits or just the players in general. I think it's a conversation that probably needs to be introduced a lot more, just to give a bit of context for what some of these players have to go through. But yeah, as I was saying, you give him that 6 months. He doesn't have to really focus on the football side of things because he's got the ban. Obviously, he's got to stay fit, and you'll have a training regimen for him and everything like that. But he gets to get his life in order for 6 months. I'm sure it's a horrible situation to be suspended, but I'm sure any player would appreciate 6 months to go and sort out everything behind the scenes so that I hit the ground running when I do get to start in January once the ban gets lifted. So Yeah, unfortunate missed opportunity, I think, for clubs last season. Now you have to be in sort of a bidding war. If it ends up being something like that for an Ivan Toney, we know there are a whole host of clubs that are interested in the guy. You've got an Arsenal, for example. They're probably back in after the news that Benjamin Sesko is preferring to stay with Red Bull, within the Red Bull family, extend his contract. So Ivan Toney then becomes a possibility for them again. You're looking at aforementioned Tottenham Hotspur. Do they need to go and get in reinforcements up front? Obviously, they've got Richarlison, they've got a Son, Werner's back on loan, but maybe they just need sort of, I think Toney would probably be the closest they could get to a Harry Kane in terms of stylistically being, that complete forward that can bring players into play, that can lead the line, that can assist, that can... I think Son would enjoy playing off of Ivan Toney. So we've got them as well. We know potentially a Liverpool could be interested in him. We don't know what they're going to be doing with Darwin Núñez and his situation, or if they just want to bolster their attacking front as well. But yeah, maybe they would be involved in the sweepstakes for him. Ivan Toney is a lifelong Liverpool fan. He's admitted that, so maybe that plays into it. I don't know if that impacts other clubs like a Man United saying, well, we don't want a Liverpool player playing for us. But spoiler alert, guys, there are a lot of players that are playing for teams that when they're fans of rivals, they just don't mention it as publicly sometimes. You'd be very surprised at some of the players that are playing for teams when they're fans of their rivals, or certainly teams that have become rivals over the years. So that's an interesting one there. Little tidbit for you there. But yeah, so Ivan Toney, what can they expect in terms of a transfer fee for Ivan Toney? As we said, obviously this is probably going to be their biggest sale, probably their biggest sale in years to come. So do you want to go big and sort of price him out of a move? It seems like his head has been turned. He had a very disappointing season when he did come back from suspension. It looked like he was uninterested. Obviously, I hope that's not the case. And I'm just saying, from the outside looking in, he looked like he had already checked out of the Brentford project and was waiting for his next project, whichever team he was going to, which is unfortunate for Brentford. But yeah, 40 million is what is being rumored as could be enough to get him. I'm assuming that 40 million will have a lot of it up front. If you're going to want to sort of pay it in a lot of installments, then maybe you're going to have to pay a bit more than the 40 million. I know Thomas Frank was quoted earlier in the season saying, offers of 100 million plus would be considered for Ivan Toney. I'm sorry, Brentford. I just don't think that you're going to get that kind of money for him. It's going to be in the 40 to 60 range, depending on how much you can get in that first payment and then the installments package going forward. So if it's going to be a lot of installments, you're probably looking closer to the 60 million. If you're going to pay a lot of it up front, you probably are going to get him in that 40 million range. So we'll see where he ends up going. I'm looking at the rest of the squad as well. There are a few players in there that either it's time, you know what I mean? It's time for them to go. I'm looking, for example, at Matthias Jorgensen. He's been there a while. Obviously, he joined Brentford in 2021 from Fenerbahce. He's not established himself as a mainstay. He's now 33 years old. Obviously, part of that Danish contingent that they have there at Brentford. But I think it's time for him to go. I don't think they're going to get too much money for him. He's got 1 year left on his contract. At best, they're getting 2.5 million at a stretch for him, but it's probably going to be a cut price deal. The important thing is just getting the wages off of the bill, off the wage bill, getting a player to go so that they can fill that roster spot. I mean, they've got Nathan Collins, for example, that came in. He's had a whirlwind of a career so far, only 22 years of age, but he's moved, I think, to 4 different clubs. over the last 4 years. He was at Stoke, then he went to Burnley, then he went to Wolves, and then he went to Brentford. So it's been topsy-turvy for him. So maybe he settles in, becomes one of the mainstays at centre-back for them. They've got me as well at centre-back, who is getting on in years. Obviously, Jorgensen, I mentioned, 33. Me is also 33 years old. Heading into next season, majority of the season, because I think he's born in September. I'm sure Guy will correct me in my ear if I'm wrong there. But he will be, 34 then for most of the season. Another player who, very good. I like him. I think he's good for Brentford, but they probably need to start getting younger in that defensive department. So we're going to be looking at some of the younger players maybe they could bring in to that position. I have question marks over whether they're going to sell an Ethan Pinnock. He seems like a player that obviously 30 years old, you don't want to gut the entire experienced defensive line. So then probably will keep him. I wouldn't be surprised if they just keep him around. He's not bad to come off just a squad depth. He comes off the bench. Sometimes he gets goals in and around. I know he pops up with goals, much to Liverpool's chagrin, quite a lot as well. But yeah, he's a decent player to have in and around the squad. As I said, we don't want to gut too much of that defensive line. But looking at Jorgensen going, we're looking at Ivan Toney obviously going. Ivan Toney is carrying the player transfer sales from their perspective. I don't think they're going to get too much from the rest of the people I'm going to speak about either, because they've got obviously they've got Paris Magoma as well, midfielder for them. Look, he's 22. Maybe you can send him out on loan and try and get him to, I don't know, rejuvenate his career. But I don't know if he's going to become the player that we're hoping him to become. Obviously, he came through at the Tottenham Academy. But yeah, so if I'm looking at if I believe in him, then I'm giving him a loan out. But the problem with loaning him out is he's one of those with a year left on his contract. You have to renew his contract. He's not going out on loan on the contract he's currently on. You would have to get sold. So either it's one of those decisions. Either he signs, we re-sign him, we believe in him over the next 3-4 years, give him that new contract, send him out on loan, hope that he can sort of grow as a player, or shake hands, transfer him. You're not going to get an awful lot of money for him either. I'd be surprised if you even get to the money I was talking about with Jorgensen for him. Another sale, he showed sparks at points during the season, but the consistency just isn't there for me. Josh Da Silva, I think he's lost his place in the pecking order. You've got some more younger players that are sort of in that midfield stroke, attacking midfielder, second striker type of situation, like a Lewis Potter, like a Shard, who obviously came in recently. But again, for Shard, he's probably more attacking minded than a Da Silva. But I think Da Silva is one that you could probably sell for a decent amount of money. I would be assuming they could get between 15 to 20 million for him. Again, we're just trying to improve the financial situation and then go and get some targets. The reason why I'm selling Josh Da Silva as well is because I think that sale could then go and be turned around and fund one of the midfield signings that I'm going to be making later on in the show. So I think they could use that to their advantage and use some of that money to then go and bolster their midfield, which I do think needs some attention. So yeah, I don't think there's much else they can do, guys. Obviously, they've also had this sort of project that they have had with their B team, Brentford B team. I believe it's Ben Winterbottom was the goalkeeper that they'll be looking to bring into the first team situation. I know he's being promoted. It's been part of the plan. Their B team manager spoke about the fact that he was going to be promoted to the first team. I think it was Neil McFarlane who was speaking about that. So they've got Ben coming in. He's getting promoted to the first team. Maybe he sticks around with the first team for the first 6 months of the season, maybe even the whole of the season, just to integrate with the first team, get used to the play style, get used to playing and training with the first team players, get to, sit and train behind Thomas Starkosha, learn from him, get some experience there. The rest of the goalkeepers, I think they could probably send out on loan and then maybe keep one of the younger ones on board as a third goalkeeper. But yeah, that's what they'll be looking to from that perspective. In terms of promotions as well from the B team, we know, again, from conversations with Neil McFarlane, that defender Jisoo Kim will be coming up. He's obviously a signing that they made from the K-League 2. They bought him last transfer window, so June 2023. It was with the intention of bringing him into the B team, let him integrate into life in the UK. Again, speaking of that thing of getting players to integrate behind the scenes without pressure. So he was brought in with that idea. He then gets promoted to the first team. So he's obviously going to add a bit more depth to that centre-back situation that they have there. Still very, very young. He's going to be 19 for most of the season, so not expecting him to get too involved, but he's a good depth piece to have there, and hopefully they continue to develop him and grow him going forward. So yeah, that's about it for Brentford in terms of what they can do. I mean, again, if they want to get rid of a Damsgaard, I know there'll be interested clubs in Damsgaard. He's been, the likes of Bayern, Leverkusen have flirted with him in the past. So they've got assets that they could flip if they really want to, put a torch to the team and really change a lot of things. But I think maybe they'll keep a majority of them. Certainly the Danish contingent is one that they like to keep quite strong in that team. So, and again, a spoiler alert, I will be adding to that Danish contingent with the centre-back that I'll be suggesting that they do sign heading into next season. But yeah, so that's probably going to leave them sitting with about 80 million, maybe 80 million to go and reinvest. I think they could do quite a bit of that. Obviously, we have to mention that they've already made one of the signings I mentioned. The replacement for Ivan Toney kind of already has been made. So we'll see whether or not he becomes a mainstay for them. Look, Igor Thiago, he comes in, obviously Brazilian player, stylistically maybe does suit that style of play to Ivan Toney, sort of a big physical presence. Will be looking to hold up play and bring other players into the fold. The scary thing for Brentford is, and maybe this is part of the scary things of signing players. So I guess this is the other side of things, my argument of a team signing Ivan Toney early. But my caveat is Ivan Toney wasn't playing football. In this situation, Brentford go and sign Igor Thiago. It's a club record signing. They signed him for 29.4 million, including add-ons. They did that deal sort of in February, if I'm not mistaken. So, all right, cool, we've signed him. He's going to be coming in the summer. He then gets injured. Whilst playing for Club Brugge. And I'm sure it was a hearts and mouths moment for Brentford. Especially when you hear, of knee injuries, you sort of wince and you worry about what have we done? We've just spent a club record amount of money on this player. He now then gets injured. But I guess fortunately for them, it was sort of a 6-week time frame window that was given in terms of his recovery. So yeah, maybe they escaped one there. Again, one of the dangers maybe then of signing a player early, knowing he's still going to go and be competitive for his, current club before he heads to you. Yeah, I thought that was a bit of a scary situation for Brentford, seeing your record signing getting injured before he gets to you. But as I said, it looks like it's a 6-week injury. He should be able to be fine for the preseason. It was an injury that happened sort of in May of this year. So again, it was late into the season, but he should be back in time for the preseason and be ready to go and have a full preseason and all of that good stuff. So yeah, a scare, but it ends up being good. Right. Let's take a quick break. And then we're going to come back and we're going to look at what incomings that Brentford can do to try and rejuvenate this team and hopefully make a better season than what happened last season. But before we get to that break as well, guys, please go and check out our presenting sponsors, EPLindex.com, in association with Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN, a virtual private network that helps with obviously keeping your data safe. It helps you be safe when using public Wi-Fi. It helps you unlock geolock content. It helps you to not get locked out of your bank account when you go overseas, for example. I know some fans are traveling for Euros. Hook up with Liberty Shield and make sure that you're not getting locked out at anything important. Also, guys, as I said, geolock content is a big thing. It helps unlock that, and it is a fantastic tool to have in your locker. You can either get the software VPN or you can get the router that gets delivered to you. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off at checkout. Guys, as I said, we'll be taking a quick break and we will be right back after these short messages. All right, we are back. We are looking at Brentford. We've made a couple of sales. We've looked at some of the sales that they could make. I've taken a conservative approach, as I've said. The big name is going, Ivan Toney. We know that one pretty much is kind of guaranteed that he's going. And then a couple of other sales that sort of just clear space in the squad more than necessarily raise an awful lot of money. Maybe the Josh Da Silva one is the one that could get a pretty penny in there as well. But some of the other ones, it's more just clearing space for them to be able to sort of bring in some more players. So then let's turn to that. Which players can they then look to bring in? I mentioned centre-back. They want to get younger. They want to be able to get some depth in there. They've got Jisoo, who's been promoted. He's going to come in. He's going to be a part of the team. I don't think he's going to get too many minutes. Maybe in the Carabao Cup, maybe in the FA Cup. But again, I think it's too soon maybe for him to be involved heavily in the Premier League. So that then brings my attention to, I teased it. I mentioned I'll be, adding, I know I've taken some of the Dutch contingent, Jorgensen away. I'm going to be replenishing that and bringing in a defender, a Dutch defender. If I'm them, I'm looking no further than Victor Nelson. Obviously, he was someone Galatasaray thought they were going to be selling last season. It didn't end up transpiring. Obviously, Tottenham had a failed attempt at signing him last season, and obviously Tottenham went and signed other people. West Ham were keen on him at a chance, but I think, get Thomas Frank on the phone, get the the Danish contingency on the phone, talk to him and say, look, we've got a nice community going here. We know you've been trying to leave Galatasaray for a couple of seasons now. I think he would be a really smart signing for him. Obviously, I think he's 24 years old at the moment, if not 25, probably 25 now, in terms of age. Decent centre-back prospect. He's still got growth in terms of sort of being more of a ball-playing centre-back. I'm not too convinced with sort of his abilities from that perspective. I think he's more of a centre-back than a ball-playing centre-back. But I think they've got, other players that can fill those roles. If he can just focus on the defensive side of things, and then you develop him. That's what some of these clubs need to be doing, develop some of the players that you bring in. So, yeah, I think he would be a very smart signing for them. In terms also of centre-backs, another interesting player that Brentford have been looking at, they've sort of sent flyers out with regards to him. So, Liverpool have on their books, lo and behold, Sepp van den Berg. Now, he's been at Liverpool for a while. He's been going out on loan season after season. Had a really, really good campaign recently. And he sort of, he went to the Bundesliga on loan. And I thought he did well at Mainz. He thought he did well at Mainz. Mainz thought he did well. A lot of interest got drummed up in the Bundesliga because of how well he played. Obviously, Mainz were desperate to retain his services, and they're already, in negotiations with Liverpool to try and sort out a deal for him. Obviously, Arne Slot needs to come back and decide who he wants in his Liverpool squad. It seems like Liverpool have sent Sepp van den Berg out on too many loans for him to still think he has a future at the club, irrespective of a new manager coming in. The impression I'm getting is that he wants to leave. He's done with Liverpool. He he's almost been saying like Liverpool are stagnating my career with all these loans. I need to go out and be sold. Again, the problem with him, and probably this was part of the frustrations that he had, was he felt like Liverpool had been pricing him out of moves, which has resulted in him having to go out on loan multiple times. This time around, Liverpool again are looking for closer to the 15 to 20 million for him. I don't know if they can get that much for him. I think they're going to have to lower the price. And as I said, he's one of those players that has been insisting on leaving. I'm sure Slot, I'd imagine, coming in will only want players that really want to be there because you want to garner that sort of new atmosphere for you and have players that are keen to be in and around what you're doing. Sepp van den Berg has that contract. I think it expires next year. I'm not sure if Liverpool have an extension clause on it as well, but I know for a fact he has to go. He's not going to sign a new contract with Liverpool, I don't believe. So Brentford, if they want to look at maybe a slightly cheaper option, then he's probably the one that I would go for. Obviously, my first preference would be Victor Nelson, but if they want that cheaper option, then maybe they can go and get a Sepp van den Berg. In terms of other positions within the tier, I think that covers centre-back quite well. If they can get one of those two, they'll be quite chuffed. Another position that they need to be looking at is right-back. They obviously have Aaron Hickey that's come in. He suffered a few injuries. It's probably going to take him a while to get back up and running. So especially the first 6 months of next season, I'm not expecting him to be doing too much in terms of being heavily involved in all of their games. You know, you want to ease him back into things. So I think he may have a bit of a squad depth role early on next season, and then they try and build up back to full fitness and back to full health for him. So they'll need someone to be starting at right back. There are a few interesting options I think that they could go with in this side of things, but I do think a smart signing for them, obviously it doesn't help that team, that Southampton have gone, that they've been promoted back to the Premier League. But I think if they can convince Kyle Walker-Peters to come on board, he's a guy that obviously plays right back. He's played left back at times before as well. So obviously could help with that depth in those wide positions. We know he can play wing back. We know he can play sort of in a back five. He can play in a back four. I just think he's an all-purpose fullback that would do really, really well at Brentford. You have him on one side, you have Rico Henry on the other side, and then you can have an Aaron Hickey deputizing between the two of them, you know, over the course of the season. I think that's quite a strong, exciting fullback department for them. So yeah, that's who I would be going for if I was there. I do think that would be an interesting signing for them if they can have sort of that basis of Rico Henry, Kyle Walker-Peters, and then Aaron Hickey deputizing between the two of them. And again, Kyle Walker-Peters and Aaron Hickey, they can sort of rotate between left back and right back. So you can sort of play around with all the pieces to make sure, obviously, Rico Henry as well, another one that came with injury. So I just think that would be a smart way to go about it if you are Brentford. I'm looking, you know, at the rest of the team as well in terms of what else they can be looking to do. Now, in terms of, you know, what else they can do, I've mentioned the centre-back. We've sort of taken care of that. We've looked at the right-back situation, taken care of that. I do think, again, with the Rico Henry injury in mind, I think it might be a smart move to bring in Alfie Doherty from Luton. We know he impressed a lot of teams with how he played last season for them. I think, again, another player who in this system probably will have less defensive responsibilities than he would have had in a Luton team if he's going to play this fullback role. Yes, he'll still need to defend. But obviously, if you're playing with that back three, he's got a bit more security behind him. He can really stretch the pitch for you, get balls into the box for the likes of Thiago to be able to get on the end of. I think he could be a smart signing for Brentford. We know they like being inventive when it comes to set pieces. If you bring in his delivery into the equation, that could be a key factor. I think that I I think Brentford could really get an exciting group of fullbacks. If you have Rico Henry, if you have Alfie Doherty, you have Aaron Hickey, and you have Kyle Walker-Peters, that is a very impressive bunch of fullbacks, and I would be looking forward to watching them play next season if they can get all of that on board. Let's move up the field a bit more. They've got to improve in midfield. They've got to get some energy in there. I'm looking at Sandberg. Obviously, he's gotten relegated with Burnley. He was at Sheffield United. Again, another player who's got a lot of interest from clubs in the past. Ends up at Sheffield United. Does well for them, I thought, first couple of seasons. Moves to Burnley. Burnley get promoted. He's hoping, obviously, to stay in the Premier League. I think he's a Premier League caliber player. And I think he could do really, really well at a club like Brentford. I think he can control midfield for them quite well. He's obviously good going up and down. Not necessarily the Danish contingent, but Norwegian. But yeah, I think he would be a smart signing for them. If they don't get him, maybe they can go and look at Josh Brownhill, his teammate at Burnley. Again, another dynamic, energetic midfielder that could go and do a job for them. You obviously need to be decent going forward and have some defensive nous to you if you're going to be playing in that Brentford midfield. The last one that I'd maybe kick the tires on, but he would, in terms of preference, I think Sander Berge will be number one. Maybe like a Wilfred Ndidi. If you do want sort of just that base player from a defensive perspective to sit, in front of that back three, and it will really give your fullbacks a license to then go forward and bomb forward and be as exciting as they need to be. Then you go get a defensive midfielder like him. Obviously, he's open to a transfer away from Leicester City. He's spoken about that in the past. I know Everton have kicked the tires on him. Maybe he's a replacement for example, Onana that might be leaving Everton. But I think Wilfred Ndidi could be a smart signing for Brentford if they want that more defensive midfielder opposed to the sort of traditionally full-on box-to-box like a Sander Berge. You bring in Ndidi, you let him sit in there. You've basically now got your 4 defensive players in your team, your 3 centre-backs with Ndidi. They can cover the transition phases from other teams. And then you've got your bombing fullbacks, you've got your attacking midfielders, and you've got your forwards up front. That could make things really exciting. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning in terms of transfers for them. I don't think they need to do too much in terms of the forward line. We've mentioned that they've already brought in the replacement for Ivan Toney and Igor Thiago. If they do want to bring in maybe a young attacking player that could come in sort of without the pressure of being the mainstay, then maybe they could do that. I don't know if that's where they'll be looking in terms of strikers. I don't know. Maybe you guys can let me know what you think of. Do they need more reinforcement up front? If you are obviously Brentford, as I mentioned, we've got the young player there in Shada who will be able to deputize. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's sort of the area that I'll be going. I'll probably be looking in Germany again. If I was going to go get another young player, I don't know if you can get a Paul Vanna in. Maybe you could get him. Looking at other players that potentially be getting it as well. Maybe Nelson Viper from mine is one that they could look to get. He is obviously very, very highly rated, very, very exciting young prospect. He's got a lot of potential, as I said, which would probably be what you'll be looking at. You've got Mbuemo, hopefully he doesn't go. You've got Wissa, who can come in and be impactful. We've seen how key he can be for them at times. You've got Shada, who's there. You've got Thiago. I don't think you need another senior, older statesman, so to speak, in terms of the attacking players. Maybe a younger one that can come in without the pressure and can try and be that hungry, aggressive young player that you can throw on maybe late in games if you need that energy, or just have him in and around the training ground as sort of that energizer bunny that's pushing these older statesmen to try and be honest. But yeah, I would be looking, if I'm going to bring in a young striker, that's who I'll be bringing in. Nelson Viper. Obviously, in the past, Liverpool have been interested in him. I know I speak a lot of players that Liverpool have been interested in, but that's because that's the club I have the closest association with, both from a fan perspective and from other relations. But yeah, so that's who I would be interested in bringing in. And again, Liverpool's interest probably waned with Klopp leaving, because there was a time when Klopp started becoming involved more with the transfers rather than the transfer committee and those behind the scenes, whereas Liverpool are going back to that model. Or maybe it's just one of those that was always in their network of players that they're looking out for. But yeah, I think that's what I would do if I was Brentford. I think next season it's about re-establishing themselves as one of the more comfortable mid-table teams, not being involved in a relegation battle. I think that will be a vast improvement. In terms of the cups, if I'm Brentford, I wouldn't be, obviously everyone wants to win a cup. You hope you go on a good run, a good cup run. But I think it's focusing on building the team chemistry, because you're going to be losing an Ivan Toney, hopefully not losing an Mbeumo, but you're going to be losing a few players, older statesmen that are spoken about, the Jorgensens, flasher players like a De Silva will be leaving if we go by this iteration of what I've done. Just re-establish yourselves, get your feet underneath you, get these new young players bedded in, get them involved, and then the season after that we'll be looking at, okay, top half, what can we do with that, and then how do we achieve that? But yeah, Brentford, establish yourselves once again as a non-relegation fighting team, and then we'll see what we can do next season. But guys, that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Go and check out all of the content on the EPL Index website. You guys will get all the Euro news that you need, all the transfer news that you need with regards to the Premier League. Go check out the Two Footer podcast with Dave Hendrick. It goes out weekly and he discusses the hottest topics in the Premier League. Obviously, go check out EPL Roundtable, where Kev De Vries sits down with panelists from respective EPL teams. They do reviews of the Premier League. Whilst we obviously during the season do the previews, they usually do the reviews of the game weeks that come thick and fast. Go and follow the Twitter page at A Tad Predictable. Let me know what you guys think of in terms of the striker or forwards. Maybe they're wingers that you guys think Brentford should be signing, or attacking players that you should think they should be signing. Obviously, they lost Mope as well. But I just think they've got enough from that perspective. I was more interested in them sorting out the defensive side of things, sorting out the wing-back situation, because they're going to be key for them next season. And then, obviously, in midfield, bringing in another starting midfielder, whether it's an Ndidi that sits or a Sander Berge that's looking to be more advanced going forward. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index on your podcast channel. Providers, give us 5 stars, write positive comments. That stuff really does help us out. I've been Tadiwa Chanakira. You can find me on my Twitter handle at TadPredicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya and Jody. Obi is at John Empire SA. Jody's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. Guys, have a good week. I've been Tadiwa Chanakira. From myself, from the crew, always remember, Jacinda Perry, Chinoshura.
And still, Salah, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty!
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans! De Bruyne!
That is what Martinelli broken! Still going up! Oh, he's done it again!
And City have won the Premier League!
Sports Social Podcast Network.